The late afternoon sun spilled warm golden light across the runway as American Airlines Flight 782 prepared for its journey from Los Angeles to New York. The passengers waiting at Gate 47 were restless, some scrolling through their phones, some sipping coffee, some pacing back and forth. Yet none of them imagined they were moments away from witnessing an unforgettable incident. The announcement echoed through the terminal, smooth and routine. Now boarding Group 1. Through the glass doors, Keanu Reeves walked quietly into view. He wasn't surrounded by any security team, no assistants, no loud entourage, just Keanu, wearing a soft charcoal gray jacket, slightly worn jeans, and his signature black backpack slung over one shoulder. His long hair fell naturally around his face, and his gentle, tired smile revealed nothing of the fame attached to him. Many passengers did double takes. A few whispered, some stared in disbelief. But Keanu remained Keanu, humble, unbothered, and patiently moving with the line. He scanned his boarding pass at the gate with a small nod and a warm thank you to the gate agent, who froze for a split second, starstruck. As Keanu entered the jet bridge, the muffled hum of the aircraft grew louder. The lights overhead flickered slightly and the air was cool, carrying that familiar smell of aviation fuel mixed with the sterile scent of cabin air. Inside the aircraft, the crew members were already rushing around, checking overhead bins, adjusting seat belts, answering impatient questions. The flight seemed unusually chaotic. Keanu stepped into the first-class cabin, not because he demanded luxury, but because the airline had quietly upgraded him out of courtesy. Still, he looked as if he would have been just as comfortable in economy. He paused for a moment, stepping aside so a couple behind him could pass. "Please go ahead," he said softly. They stared at him, eyes wide, murmuring, "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," as they hurried past. He gave a quick, almost shy smile. As he reached his seat, 2A, Keanu gently placed his backpack into the overhead bin. He didn't shove it or force it. He rearranged other bags carefully, making sure nothing fell or got squished. He was the kind of person who treated strangers' belongings with the same respect as his own. But even in this calm gesture, trouble brewed ahead. A sharp voice echoed somewhere behind the curtains, separating first class from business. A voice that carried irritation. A voice that belonged to the air hostess who would soon become the center of a storm. But Keanu didn't know that yet. He simply settled into his seat, buckled himself in, and exhaled deeply, the kind of quiet breath a man takes when he finally has a moment to rest. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as boarding continued. People murmured, sneaking glances at Keanu, unable to believe they were sharing a flight with him. But he didn't notice. Or rather, he didn't mind. He was just another passenger trying to get from one city to another. The aisle grew increasingly crowded as more passengers boarded, their footsteps echoing softly over the carpeted floor. Keanu kept his gaze lowered, hands folded, mentally preparing for a long flight. He didn't expect special treatment. He never did. But the universe that day seemed ready to test his patience. The curtain dividing first class from the rest of the cabin swung open with a sharp flick. An air hostess stepped through, mid-40s, tall, polished, and wearing a perfect but tense smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read, Marilyn. Marilyn had already dealt with 3 delayed passengers, one crying toddler, and a malfunctioning coffee machine that sprayed hot water onto her sleeve. Her mood was brittle. Every sound felt sharper. Every small inconvenience felt bigger. And now, she noticed something that irritated her further. She spotted Keanu's backpack in the overhead bin, neatly placed but occupying just enough room to catch her attention. Without even glancing at the seat number, she walked directly toward him, heels tapping rapidly. "Sir," she said sharply, crossing her arms, "you can't put your bag there. This space is for premium passengers." Keanu looked up, surprised but still calm. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said gently. "This is my seat, 2A, but if you need the space, I can hold the bag with me." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't seem to register his words, or his face. Sir, please don't argue. We have rules in place. That bag needs to be moved. Her tone was clipped, almost scolding. A couple of passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. One whispered under their breath, "Does she not know who that is?" Another quietly murmured, "That's Keanu Reeves." But Marilyn wasn't listening. She was too caught up in her own irritation to recognize the world-famous actor sitting in front of her. Keanu, still soft-spoken, nodded. "No problem at all. I'll move it." As he stood up, Marilyn huffed. "This flight is already behind schedule. I don't have time to deal with misplaced bags." Her voice dripped with annoyance. Keanu paused slightly. Not offended, just confused. Then opened the overhead bin again. A few passengers watched with disbelief as he carefully lowered his backpack, treating the moment with patience most people wouldn't have managed. Marilyn stepped closer, tapping her foot. "Please hurry, sir. Other people know how to follow instructions." Her tone finally caught the attention of nearly everyone in first class. Phones discreetly lifted. Cameras quietly started recording. But Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He simply gave a small nod and said, "Of course." Marilyn, not even thanking him, turned away sharply and disappeared behind the curtain again. The passengers around exchanged stunned looks. One man muttered, "What's her problem? That's Keanu Reeves, for heaven's sake." But Keanu just returned to his seat, placing his backpack at his feet and giving a small, tired sigh. The cabin settled into a tense quiet after Marilyn stormed back behind the curtain. A few passengers exchanged glances, shaking their heads, still stunned at how sharply she had spoken to Keanu. The hum of the airplane's ventilation filled the silence, mixing with the occasional shuffle of boarding passengers. Through it all, Keanu Reeves sat calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. He placed his backpack gently under the seat, making sure not to inconvenience anyone. His movements were slow, thoughtful, almost apologetic. He leaned back and exhaled softly, the tension barely visible in his shoulders. To most people, being snapped at like that, especially when innocent, would have sparked frustration, anger, or at least a defensive response. But Keanu wasn't wired like most people. He had lived through louder storms, harsher moments, and deeper pain. An irritated air hostess wasn't going to break his peace. A woman in the seat across from him leaned over slightly. "Mr. Reeves, are you okay?" she whispered. Keanu gave her a warm, reassuring smile. "Yes, thank you. It's all good. She's probably just having a tough day." The woman blinked. Keanu wasn't just calm. He was compassionate toward the person who had just treated him rudely. She nodded in admiration. A teenager a few rows back peeked between the seats, holding his phone but too shy to record openly. "Dude, he's so chill," the boy whispered to his friend. "My dad would have yelled already." Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small paperback book, its pages worn, its cover faded. He always brought something to read for flights, preferring quiet moments over noise. Today's choice was a classic philosophy book, ironically titled The Art of Peace. He opened it to where he'd left off, but he couldn't help catching the nervous energy around him. People were watching him. Whispers crawled through the cabin like a breeze. Did she really talk to him like that? She didn't even look at his ticket. How did she not recognize him? He handled it so politely. Keanu pretended not to hear the comments, but there was a tiny smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Embarrassed, humble, hoping the attention would fade soon. The last thing he wanted was for the situation to escalate. He just wished the flight would take off peacefully. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A loud thump came from the overhead bin nearby as another passenger tried to shove a large suitcase into a tiny space. Marilyn reappeared through the curtain, frustration written all over her face once again. She walked past Keanu without glancing at him, but passengers noticed her stiff posture, her annoyance intensifying. Keanu simply lowered his eyes to his book as if trying to disappear behind the pages, but he could feel something building, a pressure in the air, a sense that this wasn't over. He knew rude behavior wasn't always personal, yet something in Marilyn's demeanor suggested a storm still brewing. As the plane continued to fill, the atmosphere inside first class shifted from mild curiosity to quiet outrage. Passengers who had witnessed Marilyn's behavior whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, some glancing at Keanu with sympathy. The respectful, soft-spoken actor sat quietly with his book, unaware that he had become the center of the cabin's conversation. A middle-aged businessman in seat 1B leaned to his wife. "I can't believe she spoke to him like that," he muttered. "She didn't even give him a chance to explain." His wife nodded, her brows furrowed. Even if he wasn't famous, that tone wasn't acceptable, but the fact that it was Keanu Reeves, unbelievable. A young woman 2 rows behind lifted her phone hesitantly, the camera angled discreetly. She wasn't trying to invade his privacy. She was capturing the moment where a celebrity known for kindness was being treated unfairly. Her video caught Keanu calmly flipping through his book, his posture small, humble, almost trying not to take up space. Another man whispered, "People won't believe this unless someone records it." And so, more phones started appearing, carefully held at waist level, screen brightness lowered. No one wanted to embarrass Keanu. They wanted proof of how gracefully he handled disrespect. Meanwhile, Keanu remained unaware of the quiet uproar around him. He lifted his book slightly, tilting it to catch the light. As he read, his eyes softened. The philosophical passages about patience, understanding, and humility seemed almost too fitting for the moment. He breathed slowly as if grounding himself. A little girl seated across the aisle tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, that man is very nice. Why was the lady angry at him?" Her mother smiled gently. "Some people forget to be kind, sweetheart, but he's showing us how to stay calm." The child looked at Keanu with admiration, then whispered loudly enough for a few people to hear, "He looks like a superhero." People around smiled, their frustration easing slightly. But the peace didn't last long. The curtain rustled again. Marilyn stepped through for the 3rd time, her expression tight and her walk brisk. She scanned the cabin with irritation, noticing the subtle glow of phone screens. Her eyes narrowed. She sensed she was being watched, judged. Her gaze landed briefly on Keanu, and for a moment something flickered in her expression. Confusion, curiosity, maybe even annoyance that he wasn't reacting like other passengers might have. But she brushed it off. She walked past him, pretending he didn't exist. Passengers exchanged looks. A soft wave of murmurs traveled through the rows. "She didn't even apologize. She still hasn't realized who he is. She's doubling down." Even the flight attendants in the back were beginning to talk. One younger attendant whispered to her colleague, "I think Marilyn is messing with the wrong passenger today." The cabin buzzed softly with uneasy murmurs as boarding neared its end. The overhead bins clicked shut one by one, and the last few passengers hurried down the aisle. Keanu closed his book gently, sensing movement around him. He wasn't tense, just alert, quietly aware that Marilyn's energy kept brushing the edges of calm like a storm cloud refusing to drift away. Then it happened. Marilyn reappeared, clipboard in hand, eyes darting down at her seating chart with a sharpness that suggested she was looking for a problem rather than solving one. She paused at Keanu's row, her gaze sweeping over him with subtle disapproval. "Sir," she said, voice tight, "you're in the wrong seat." Keanu blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry?" His tone was gentle, almost apologetic, though he had done nothing wrong. She clicked her pen aggressively against the clipboard. "This is 2A. You're seated in 4C. Please gather your belongings and move." A ripple of disbelief passed through the cabin. A man nearby whispered, "Here we go again." Keanu remained calm. "Ma'am, I believe there may be a mistake." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his boarding pass, unfolding it carefully. "This says 2A. Marilyn didn't take it. She didn't even glance at it. Instead, she scoffed. "Sir, we deal with this every day. Passengers misread their tickets, think they're upgraded, try to take premium seats." A passenger 2 rows away muttered, "He is premium." Another said under his breath, "She's not even looking." Keanu extended the pass slightly closer. "I'm not trying to take anyone's seat. Here." Finally, Marilyn snatched the pass from his hand with a forced smile that looked more like irritation. She scanned it quickly, far too quickly, then raised an eyebrow. "This must be a printing error," she declared, voice clipped. "Your original seat was likely changed. You still need to move." Passengers gasped. "Printing error? Seriously? How can she talk like that?" A woman in 3B lifted her phone again, whispering, "This is unreal." Keanu, still unfailingly composed, stood halfway and said softly, "If someone needs the seat, I don't mind switching." That was it. The tension snapped. A passenger behind him couldn't stay silent. "No, sir, don't you move. That is your seat." Another chimed in, louder. "Look at the ticket properly." Someone else added, "How is she the only one confused?" Under the rising voices, Marilyn straightened stiffly. "Excuse me," she warned. "I am doing my job. Please let me handle this." But her tone only fueled the frustration. Keanu lifted his hands gently as if calming a room of children. "It's all right, everyone. Really." He turned back to Marilyn, still polite. "Ma'am, may I please see the seating chart? Just to clarify." The request caught her off guard. Her jaw tightened. Passengers are not allowed to review official documents. But the crack in her authority was visible now. Passengers exchanged looks. Some angry, some bewildered, all on edge. The tension in the first-class cabin thickened like a storm cloud ready to burst. Marilyn stood frozen, her eyes flicking between the boarding pass and Keanu's gentle, patient expression. She finally realized who he was. But the damage had already been done, and passengers were no longer whispering. They were openly criticizing her behavior. Just then, a firm voice came from the front of the aircraft. "Is there a problem here?" The curtain slid open and the captain stepped through, tall, composed, and carrying the calm authority of someone used to handling emergencies at 35,000 feet. His uniform was crisp, his hat tucked under his arm, his expression stern yet controlled. Behind him, a young co-pilot watched with concern. Marilyn stiffened immediately. "Captain, I was just addressing a seat discrepancy." But he held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. Then he turned to Keanu, and his entire demeanor softened. "Mr. Reeves," the captain said with a respectful nod, "it's an honor to have you on board today. I'm very sorry to hear there's been an issue." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. Marilyn's face drained of color. Keanu stood up slightly, shaking his head. "Oh, no, sir. There's no need to apologize. It's just a misunderstanding." But the captain wasn't convinced. "I was informed that someone in first class was being treated unprofessionally," he said, choosing his words carefully. "And now I see the situation for myself." Marilyn swallowed hard. "Captain, with all due respect, I was only enforcing airline policy." "Policy?" The captain raised an eyebrow. "You tried to relocate a first-class passenger holding a valid first-class boarding pass, and you didn't check it properly before speaking to him." Passengers nodded, some muttering, "Exactly," and finally someone said it. The captain continued, voice firm but controlled. "We are here to ensure passengers are comfortable and respected. That includes every passenger, famous or not." Keanu interjected gently, "Really, it's fine. I'm not upset." His humility made the captain smile slightly. "Mr. Reeves, I appreciate your kindness, but I insist. We owe you an apology." He turned to Marilyn. The entire cabin watched. Marilyn's eyes flickered. Anger, embarrassment, regret. It was hard to tell. She held her clipboard tightly, knuckles white. "Marilyn," the captain said quietly, "apologize to the passenger." The air hostess opened her mouth, closed it, then forced out a stiff, reluctant, "I apologize for the inconvenience." Gasps sounded from passengers who found the apology painfully insincere. Keanu nodded politely. "Thank you, no hard feelings." But the captain wasn't done. "He'll have another attendant assist this section for the rest of the flight," he added. Marilyn's eyes widened. "Captain, that's final." She froze, humiliated. Passengers exchanged satisfied glances. The captain gave Keanu a warm nod before returning to the cockpit. "If you need anything, Please let us know." Marilyn stood frozen in the aisle, her clipboard pressed tightly against her chest as if it were a shield. The captain's words echoed in her head, sharp, humiliating, impossible to ignore. She had been removed from first-class service, in front of passengers, in front of a world-famous actor she had treated badly. Her cheeks burned a deep shade of red. The younger attendant, Sarah, stepped forward to take Marilyn's place, offering Keanu a polite smile as she passed. "If you need anything, Mr. Reeves, I'll be right here," Sarah said gently. Keanu returned the kindness with a small nod. "Thank you," he replied. Marilyn watched this exchange with a tightening jaw. She felt the eyes of the entire cabin on her, judging, whispering, recording. The humiliation weighed on her like a heavy coat she couldn't take off. She turned away, pretending to straighten the curtains even though her hands were shaking slightly. Passengers weren't subtle. "I can't believe how rude she was," someone said aloud. "She didn't even try to hide it." "Well, now everyone's recording her." Every whisper stabbed at Marilyn's pride. She tried to maintain her professional posture, but anger and embarrassment tangled together inside her. She hadn't meant for things to go this far. She hadn't even realized who Keanu Reeves was. Not because she didn't know him, but because she hadn't really looked. She'd been too stressed, too distracted, too wrapped up in her own irritation. But now that she finally understood the truth, regret washed over her in cold waves. She turned slightly to glance at Keanu. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't victorious. He wasn't even watching her. He sat calmly in his seat, hands folded, expression soft. The gentleness in his face made her embarrassment worse. If he had been angry or arrogant, she could have justified her behavior, but he wasn't. He was kind. Too kind. Sarah passed Marilyn again on her way to help another passenger. "Are you okay?" Sarah whispered carefully. "I'm fine," Marilyn snapped before catching herself. "I mean, yes, I'm fine." She swallowed hard and stepped aside. Sarah nodded sympathetically before returning to her duties. Marilyn stayed near the curtain, pretending to adjust small details just so she had something to do. She could hear the low hum of passengers discussing the incident. She could feel every judgmental look like a spotlight on her. The weight of her mistake began to settle. Heavier, more painful, more real. Eventually, she took a steadying breath. She knew what she needed to do next, even if pride resisted it. She walked slowly toward Keanu's row, her voice low so the other passengers couldn't hear, not wanting public humiliation to repeat itself. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice trembling slightly. Keanu looked up, offering a soft smile that immediately eased the tension, yes. Marilyn's shoulders dropped. "I truly am sorry. I wasn't professional. I let my stress get the best of me, and you didn't deserve that." The atmosphere inside the first-class cabin settled into a calm, almost reflective quiet after Marilyn's whispered apology. The tension that had crackled in the air began to soften. Passengers relaxed slightly, though many still eyed Marilyn with lingering judgment. They weren't convinced she deserved forgiveness, but Keanu was about to show them why he was admired by millions. After returning to her station behind the curtain, Marilyn didn't move for a long moment. She stared down at her clipboard, breathing carefully, trying to steady herself. She felt the sting of humiliation, the weight of her mistake, and the embarrassment of having apologized to a man she had treated harshly, only to find him kinder than any passenger she had ever met. Meanwhile, Keanu sat quietly, his fingers resting lightly on the open pages of his book. But he wasn't reading, not anymore. He looked thoughtful, pensive, as if reflecting on the entire encounter, not with resentment, not with annoyance, but with a deep understanding that people were complicated, that stress could twist someone's behavior without defining who they were. A few passengers whispered, "He actually forgave her?" "He's too kind, seriously. He handled this better than most people would." Sarah, the younger flight attendant now in charge of first class, approached Keanu with a warm smile. "Mr. Reeves, can I bring you water or tea? Maybe something to make the flight more comfortable. Keanu shook his head gently.
Thank you. I'm all right, really.
Sarah nodded, impressed by his humility. Across the aisle, an elderly lady spoke up softly.
You're a gentleman, Mr. Reeves. Truly.
Keanu offered her a respectful nod. Just trying to keep things calm. We're all traveling together. It's better to make the journey peaceful. His words carried a kindness that spread through the cabin like a warm blanket. A few passengers smiled, some softened in their rigid postures. Others looked at Keanu as if learning something important. It wasn't often they saw grace in a moment that could so easily turn ugly. Behind the curtain, Marilyn gathered her courage once more. This time she didn't approach because she had to, but because she wanted to. She stepped forward, her voice still low but steadier.
Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to thank you for understanding. I know I didn't act my best.
Keanu turned toward her, offering a gentle smile that immediately eased her tension. It's okay, he said softly. We all have stressful days. I mean that. Marilyn blinked, taken aback by how sincere he sounded. You're very gracious. Keanu shook his head lightly. You don't need to thank me. I believe people deserve second chances. Compassion goes a long way. Passengers who overheard felt a warmth rise in their chests. One whispered, "This is why everyone loves him." Another nodded, "Because he treats everyone like they matter." Marilyn's shoulders finally relaxed. For the first time since the incident began, the flight finally lifted off, engines roaring softly as the city lights shrank beneath the clouds. The cabin dimmed into a warm glow, and passengers settled into their seats. Despite the earlier tension, a calm, reflective silence filled first class. Keanu leaned back, finally closing his book. For the first time since boarding, he allowed himself to relax. The hum of the aircraft was steady, soothing, until it suddenly wasn't. A sharp jolt rocked the plane. Then another. Passengers gasped. Seatbelts rattled. A glass clinked and toppled over on someone's tray. The overhead lights flickered once, briefly plunging the cabin into partial darkness before stabilizing. The captain's voice crackled over the speaker, steady but urgent. Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The plane dipped abruptly. A few passengers cried out. One woman clutched her chest. A man across the aisle gripped his armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. But Keanu remained astonishingly calm. He sat upright, scanning the cabin, not in fear, but in concern for everyone else. Sarah, the young attendant, struggled to keep her balance as she rushed to secure loose items. The turbulence shook the aircraft again, harder this time. She grabbed onto the back of a seat, barely keeping herself from falling. Keanu reached out instinctively, steadying her arm. Easy, he said softly. Hold on. She nodded, breathless. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Another violent shake rattled the plane. Overhead bins trembled, threatening to burst open. A child in the second row began crying loudly, terrified. And then unexpectedly, Marilyn reappeared. Her earlier humiliation had evaporated beneath the pressure of a different instinct, responsibility. She rushed forward, gripping the cabin wall for support. Despite the fear in her eyes, her voice was steady as she knelt beside the frightened child. It's okay, sweetheart, she said gently. Just hold on to your mom. You're safe. The mother mouthed a grateful thank you. Keanu watched Marilyn, saw the fear, the vulnerability, the dedication, and he stood slowly, bracing himself as the plane shook again. Do you need help, he asked. Marilyn blinked, surprised by the offer, surprised he was thinking of her at a time like this. Yes, she whispered, I can't check row 3. The turbulence. I'll go, Keanu said calmly. Sarah protested. Mr. Reeves, you should stay seated. But another jolt threw her into the side of a seat. Keanu caught her again, steady but gentle. Passengers watched, breathless, as Keanu moved down the aisle with surprising stability for someone not trained for this. He checked on passengers, reassured them with calm words, and made sure seatbelts were secure. Marilyn followed behind him, her fear slowly melting into gratitude. Each time their eyes met, she saw not a celebrity, not a man she had scolded, but someone compassionate, grounded, unbelievably steady. The moment the plane touched down at LAX, the tension that had filled the cabin finally dissolved, replaced by a strange mix of relief, excitement, and lingering embarrassment. Passengers unbuckled their seatbelts, craning their necks to see whether Keanu Reeves would slip out quietly or if something more dramatic would unfold. After all, they had just witnessed an incident that felt like a scene from a movie. Unbelievable, unexpected, and strangely inspiring. Keanu stood slowly, giving the people around him his usual soft, almost shy smile. He lifted his backpack, still in the wrong overhead bin the air hostess had fussed about earlier, and stepped into the aisle. The passengers sitting nearby greeted him with small nods and whispered words of admiration. Some told him they were big fans, others thanked him for being so calm, and a few simply gave him a supportive smile. Keanu responded to each person with genuine warmth. Behind him, the air hostess stood frozen near the galley, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes were red, not from anger, but from shame. The more she realized how her behavior had looked, the more her heart sank. She kept replaying everything, her tone, her attitude, her assumptions, and it made her stomach twist. But Keanu, noticing her distress, paused before exiting the aircraft. He approached her gently, keeping his voice low, soft, and private. "Really," he said. "It's okay. You didn't know. We all have moments where we're overwhelmed. Don't let this ruin your day." The hostess blinked, surprised that he had not only forgiven her, but had taken the time to comfort her. She nodded with a trembling voice. I'm really sorry, sir." "Take care," Keanu said with that familiar kindness the world admires. As he walked through the jet bridge, a wave of bright phone screens lit up. Dozens of videos and photos had already been uploaded by passengers during the flight. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips of the air hostess snapping at him, paired with his calm reaction, spread like wildfire. Comments poured in. "Keanu Reeves is truly the nicest guy in Hollywood." Imagine disrespecting Keanu Reeves of all people. "He handled it better than anyone else would." News outlets picked up the story almost instantly. Hashtags trended worldwide. Fan pages posted edited clips showing the moment the captain recognized Keanu, the moment passengers defended him, the moment he forgave the hostess. Even people who weren't fans before were enchanted by the story. What stood out most wasn't the drama, but the gentleness Keanu had shown. Even in an uncomfortable moment, he stayed humble, patient, and kind. That was what people admired. Not his fame, not his power, but his character. By the end of the day, the incident had become a global reminder that kindness can shine through even in the smallest, unexpected moments. And Keanu Reeves, once again, proved why the world loves him so much.